Welcome to the Business Trendsetter Podcast, where we talk about trends and how to grow your business. My name is Manny Turan.
And I'm Adam Hartung.
We are Spark Partners. We help businesses and entrepreneurs grow. And the way that you grow in business, of course, it's kind of a no-brainer, but you grow more by selling more of what people want to buy. And that second half of what people want to buy is always some level of elusive to people. They don't understand that that's constantly changing. You know, at Spark Partners, we talk a lot about trends, and they impact everybody, not just a business, but government and education and schools and just society in general. So what I thought we'd do today, Adam, is I thought we'd do some sort of model case studies and talk about certain businesses and see how they might take their existing business and then apply some of the principles that we talk about trends, and then sort of come up with some potential scenarios on what they should do next. What do you think?
Sure. Sounds like a good exercise.
And I think by doing so, some of our listeners and viewers can begin to, in their mind, crystallize how they might do this for themselves. And of course, one of the things that Adam and I do quite a bit is we help businesses to do just that. So say, for instance, Adam, I own a company that does high-end audio receivers for home theater, okay? And we've been running the business for 25 years. I started it when I was in college. Say I'm the CEO, and I'm an audiophile, and I really enjoy listening to music. And we've been selling pretty sort of on a pretty good basis up until about 3 years ago, and things started slowing down. And I've had to lay off about a quarter of my workforce, and I'm struggling to figure out what's happening, why people aren't buying my high-end audio receivers and systems. And I've got to make some decisions here. I'm coming to the end of the year, and I've got to decide whether or not to take money out of my personal nest egg to reapply in the business, even though things are failing. So let's kind of play this scenario and pretend I'm the CEO and ask me some questions.
Well, the first thing I would say is when business was going well, what was your customer profile? Who was buying your product when things were good?
It tended to be a lot of middle to late age people in their 50s and 60s that had usually they could afford a second home or a third home, or they're doing a big revamp of their existing home.
Okay, so what we're trying to do when we think about customers is literally say, what's happening in the trend of demographics and how would that be impacting your business? And so, as you described your customer, one of the things I would start to pay attention to is that what's happening is the scenario is shifting. And when business was good, people were in their, let's say, 50s and early 60s. But if they're retiring now, then those people probably don't have the money to spend on audiophilia anymore because they're retiring or they're saving for retiring since they've gotten older. And so my first thing would be, okay, the trend in demographics is that we've got this aging population. That aging population now doesn't have the free cash flow that it had when it was working to spend. Is there another demographic that you can see is into this kind of an audiophilia? Is there a regional demographic? Is there another nation, another country? Where would be a place that the kinds of things you have this passion for around audiophilia, where would there be a demographic that would be more inclined to buy?
Yeah, I would say, the very young demographic is not really in line with what we do currently. We provide these systems start at $25,000 and go up. And so a lot of them are young, they can't afford it. And a lot of them, frankly, are using headphones and using, these AirPods and stuff like that. So they don't seem to have the same appreciation of the rich audio that we've provided for the past 25 years. And as far as what other demographic would be interested in this is, we have talked about expanding to Western Europe, where they have a little bit of a more community basis sort of society where, they have dinner parties and people that are retiring tend to be more social, where in the US, they tend to be a little bit more inclusive. So I guess, exclusive. I guess I don't know where else we could go.
So it sounds like as we're developing the future scenario, your customer base is moving away, and the products that you have are not as appealing to any of the demographics that we can easily identify. Perhaps if you're domestic U.S. seller product, it gets tough to go international, right? And there's not any, unless you're going to go to India or Brazil, you're fighting a demographic problem anywhere that you want to go. So the next thing to say is, well, okay, where is the entertainment experience for the customers that you could go for? So in other words, what are people that are under the age of 40? What's their form of entertainment? What's exciting to them?
Yeah, I think for them, it does also tend to be home theater, but it then goes down from a $25,000 system to them wanting to spend $2,500. So it doesn't have the same sort of revenue structure that we would like. In that, right now we sell system, and like I mentioned, it starts at 25, but they tend to be in the 50s, 55 grand, 60 grand. And if we go to this larger demographic, people are going, are setting up home theaters all the time, but they don't always have that ability to spend that kind of money.
Okay, but let's dig in deeper though. Let's dig in deeper to what people are doing. So today we have people in the gig economy, and we have people that are working asynchronously, and we have people that are working from home. So how could the kinds of things you've sold, your knowledge of sound systems, how could that improve the way they work? Is there an opportunity to say, instead of sitting in front of a mobile phone, or sitting in front of a low-cost iPad or a tablet or a PC and doing a Zoom call, is there technology you could bring to them that would make that a richer, better experience?
Yeah, I think about 20% of our business is in the commercial space. Actually, less than 20, maybe 15%, is going in and setting up really high-end telecom systems for Fortune 50 companies, where they can have the boardrooms that. Think about Zoom on steroids, right? Think about Zoom with having multiple cameras, rich audio, that's all directional fed. So if you're having a big boardroom and there's 20 people around a table, our microphone systems allow the listener to know where the person is sitting based on the audio composition.
Yeah, so I'm sitting here thinking to myself, could you perhaps go to a small to mid-sized company and say, look, you've outsourced to a gig worker, or you've changed your working to where these employees, some of your employees are working half-time or more from an off-site location. And now you don't have them in the office anymore. So the question is, you were spending money on office, you were spending on the space itself and what it costs, coffee and all the stuff that goes with having somebody in an office. Could you redirect some of that money and say, hey, you know what, for these people when they're working off-site, could they have a portable system that they could take with them, take it home, and they could set that up wherever they work in their house or home office or whatever, and then they could be much better connected up whenever we do our Zoom calls or whenever we need to connect when they're working from home. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that look at the environment and say, what is the environment producing as an opportunity, rather than trying to say, how do I push more audiophile product that I've been selling? Try to say, what is it that people need? And I think there probably is, I'm thinking about this in terms of I see where there could be a need, because I've talked to a lot of people. They say, well, the interactions, the asynchronous interactions, or the interactions that I have remotely are less rich. And I don't feel like I'm communicating as well. I don't catch on to people's voice inflections or their face movements or their body movements nearly the way I used to. And so here's a way I'd say I'd go explore that market. Let's say, could you try to take this new trend, working from home, and amplify it and grow it? Because it's not going to go back. People aren't going to all go back to the office. So I would see an opportunity in that. And then the other one I would think about is, I know that as you get under the age of 40 and you keep working to lower ages, people just love gaming. They love the computer gaming world. And it's way beyond anything that it was like 20 years ago. And so I would also say, what do you know about Oculus and 3D goggles and what you can do in terms of using 3D goggles and making a business out of selling those, hooking them up to people's systems? In other words, instead of going into somebody's house and giving them a audiophilia thing, maybe what you should be focusing on are people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s that are first-time homeowners or apartment renters, where their idea of an audiophile experience is actually a 3D metaverse experience of some kind. And what have you done to sell those products and
Right.
find out what the customers want that you could sell?
Exactly. So this was a very good scenario, Adam, because it kind of led the conversation from, as a business owner, as a manager, or somebody at the executive level, you're faced with declining revenues and you're wondering why, what's happening to your market. And I think asking those tough questions is oftentimes the first step. And, one of the things that we've talked about this in the past, Adam, is a lot of these business owners and executives, they don't want to hear the answer. They want to hear some magic bullet that's going to solve their problem. It's like the diet world, right? I want to lose 25 pounds, but I want to just take a magic pill and have it happen. And I think that's true for business. And it goes to show that, people are going to be people. And I really like the way you walked me through the process. And that's the kind of thing that we've talked about in the past. And it's kind of one of the things that we do in our course is really teach you how to think critically. And, it all kind of starts with you, the entrepreneur. So
yeah, I agree with you about that. I mean, recently, I had an experience where I visited somebody and they had a really great system, a new audio system in their house. And I was talking about the fact that today, nobody would go replicate the system that person has. He actually has tubes in his equipment, right? It's like that generation. Now, those of us from that generation, we will talk about the richness of the sound and how you get things from tubes that you can't get from solid state and blah, blah, blah. And a funny thing happened while we're sitting there talking. I've culled my record collection a few times, but I think I still have at least 500 albums that are considered collectible, right? Things that were first time albums, real breakouts, things like that. And, to me, the only pure sound is when you play vinyl on the right kind of a player into one of those systems. When he went to demo the system, he asked his girlfriend to demo the system. She pulled out an iPad and she connected it up through some device so that she could run her iPad. I said, oh, man, that's synthesized sound that you're putting into the tubes. How are you going to get anything back out of it, right? And it was just kind of like realizing that his girlfriend, who was younger, she was already at that point that, I was trying to explain to her why a record would sound different than it would sound on a tape, than it would sound on streaming. And I quickly lost her, and she really didn't care. I mean, she didn't know bits and how many compression ratios we have and all these kinds of things that go into audio. She didn't care. She just wanted to listen to some songs, right? And and good enough is good enough. And that's another thing. We tend to, as people in our business, overshoot the customer. This is a very common problem. Clayton Christensen first identified this about 20 years ago. Then if you're making pool cues or you're making anything like that, what you'll do is you'll make a really, really good pool cue, and then you'll just keep trying to figure out what makes a better pool cue. And you keep going down that road until you find that the most perfect pool cue would have the most perfect material made in this most perfect way. And you have this perfect pool cue and it costs $1,000. And then the market for the $1,000 pool cue is like 100 people, right? Because the rest of the people say, what? I mean, I want to shoot pool twice a year, right? So just hand me that wooden stick. That's good enough for what I want.
Yeah, exactly.
And that overshooting on a quality basis is something that we do in business a lot. And what it causes us to do is we're fixated on our business. We want to do more, better, faster, cheaper. We keep figuring out how to do more, better, faster, cheaper until we've gone way beyond what the customer needs. And now we're walking and saying, oh, you need to keep buying from me because look how great this is. We saw this in printing for the longest time. There's this thing called a printer's loop, L-U-P-E, which is this glass thing you look through because this company named Loop created the product. And you could look at how the printing was, through this magnifying glass. And I remember for years, I would talk to people and say, how many end users care what you can see through that loop? So you see a little bleeding between the dots. Okay, when you look through, they're looking at the package. Can they read it? If they can read it and it's pretty clear, then they're pretty happy. Why do we overshoot? What we're talking about here is we tend to overshoot in our existing business, and that means we undershoot in the opportunity change.
Yep.
So it tend to happen for our audiophile company, for example. There's a tendency to say, hey, I can accumulate really high-end audiophilia equipment used at a very low price because older people are dying, their children don't want it, the material's available, I can get it now at cents on the dollar. I'll bring it back and I can build a great business out of this, and I can just get incredible sound at low prices, only to find out that you're way over what the marketplace now wants. They're used to digitized sound. They're used to listening to their music on a mobile device with ear pods, right? That kind of a thing. And so when you tell them, well, this is way better, and they say, well, wait a minute, but how? I live in a 1-bedroom apartment, or I share an apartment with somebody, or and you're like, well, if we could put you in a stereo room, and we get all the, we put all the blankets up and all these things so that we can control the noise, you would really tell the difference. And they kind of look at you like, yeah, that's never going to happen. So why are we talking about it? So that's that overshooting. And one of the things that I think we work a lot with, I know that personally I've done a lot of this over the years, is I'll sit down with people and say, you inevitably overinvest in the business you've always had. You keep trying to make it better, usually way beyond what the customer needs. And in the pursuit of that, you've spent your money overshooting the customer need and undershooting what else you could do for customers. Now, take it to the point of your dry cleaner, right? Your dry cleaner gets to where, in the pursuit of getting your dry cleaning, they anticipate when you're going to need a pickup. So they say, I know that you're going to need a pickup on Thursdays at, right after work. And then they anticipate that you're going to need it the next day at 8 o'clock. So they got the dry cleaning there at 8 o'clock next morning. Meanwhile, you're doing less and less dry cleaning because clothes aren't made that way anymore. We don't have to dry clean as much stuff. And, you're not having to go to the office, so you don't need business attire as much. So what he's doing is he's getting better and better at dry cleaning and not realizing, wait a minute, my customers don't need more dry cleaning. They're going to need less dry cleaning.
Right.
What other services do they need? Right. And what's going to be related to their work from home? What's going to be related to their
Could they do a delivery service? Could they do a pickup service? Could they release an app or work with an app to let you know when your stuff's going to be ready? I mean, there's lots of innovation that can happen around these sort of archaic type businesses for sure.
So, like right now, I'm not a big fan of the metaverse thing that's going on in the Oculus glasses, and I'm not a huge fan of the strategy position that Zuckerberg has taken for Facebook inside of Meta. But I'll back off from that, and I will say that I talk to people and I say, have you tried to think about, could you create an app in which a person would use these Oculus, in which you would want to have the 3D realistic environment? Because there will be people who develop really good apps. We know that in gaming, it's a big deal, right? But there could be people who could develop really good apps for these things. Some kind of being able to envision a scenario, for example. Let's say that you were going to go do some kind of photography in Hawaii, where they're having the dual volcanoes right now. Could you put on an Oculus headset and then take that journey fictionally, virtually, so that when you go there to take the photographs, you know exactly what you're doing. You know the pathway you want to take, how close you're going to be able to get, all these things, so that you really expedite the experience. And other business applications, could you create this so that somebody would know how to, in the fire, teach people how to be fire people by, having them, instead of going to a site where they set a fire, simulate walking into a fire. Could you have it in an equipment environment where somebody's simulating what it is to run a refinery or process control equipment? Just making of cardboard, for example, is a giant machine 2 blocks long that produces all this paper and all this cardboard. Well, there's about 50 people operating that. Could you, before you put them in the factory, could you run them through training where they would use these headsets?
Right.
So even though I'm currently not sure what's going to happen, what I would say is that if you do develop these applications for that kind of technology and you're early to the game, you're going to learn something, and you probably could start to find some applications that are really valuable. And that's what we don't do that much of. We tend to want to sit around and say, oh, that's good for the other person. She can go out and do that early development. I don't want to do it. I want to keep more, better, faster, cheaper, the thing I've always done.
You ready for another one?
Sure.
Okay. So now I'm a young lady who's in her early 20s that is about to inherit her grandfather's refuse collection company. They go out and they do a sort of boutique. They put these roll-offs at different construction sites, and they go also have a small route of rural people where they pick up their trash. And it's been steady business for the past 40 years, actually, as grandpa's been growing this, but he's ready to retire and dad doesn't want it. So I'm interested in business. So I want to take it over, but I don't want to just do more, better, faster, cheaper, but it's not exactly the most sexy of all businesses. It's literally picking up trash. So I'm a 24-year-old trash collector. How can I empower my 17 employees? I've got 12 trucks. I've got a compactor that I can deploy. I got 2 compactors and I've got 10 roll-offs. So I'm asking you, Adam, as Spark Partners to help me to grow. And what do you think?
Well, one of the things that's been clear in both the scenarios you gave me was that from the very beginning, you described your value delivery system, not your value proposition, in both instances. And this one you said, I've got this many trucks, I got this many employees, I got these compactors, whatever it is. And what people don't realize when they're talking to me is usually when that's going on, I'm not even listening anymore because I don't care what assets you have. The question is, what is it your customers want? So I would start off with, okay, today your customers are they asking for any services that you don't provide? Have you even asked them about that? It seems so self-normalized, right? Okay, I'm in the trash business, but do they see the business the same way you do? Because a lot of times customers will say, well, I see something that you're not doing. Like I have liquids that I find difficult to get rid of, right? Or they could say, I would like it very much if we could find a way that I could do more separation of these products to get more recycling. Only something like 10% of plastics get recycled in the United States, and we're one of the best at recycling plastics. On the other hand, 99% of paper and cardboard get recycled. So I would talk to the customers and say, hey, could we come up with something you would value?
We've had lots of customers ask for us to deliver rock and aggregate, or be able to haul away construction materials, which we don't typically haul away these days. Or they've asked us to whether or not we can deliver water. Some of these places are rural and require water trucks to come out, and these roads are not. They're not good roads, right? They're horrible roads, and our big trucks can make it through, but sometimes the water trucks can't make it through. And you're right, by the way, Adam. I did start off both of these with that exact methodology because I see it as well. People step up to the plate and they try to show their stats, where at the same time we're trying to figure out, well, what's your true value and how can you get how can you maximize that?
What's your value proposition? And people get so busy running the business that they don't think about their value proposition. And somebody that would start talking to me the way that you did about, okay, I'm doing this trash business, I'd say, you have not once said what your value is. You've said, oh, it's an old business. It's been around for 40 years. It's just dragging trash away. And I'm saying, wait a minute. What you just said is you have no value. You're at the very bottom end of the value proposition, which is like you're eliminating trash, which is something that last thing people want. So consequently, they don't want to pay anything for it. So you're in a price war to get, who will be the cheapest person to haul the trash away. You got to step back from that and say, okay, what's the value people want here? Is it getting rid of stuff they don't want? How could you expand that? Could you expand from taking away the existing trash to taking away stuff that you don't take right now? Stuff that's hard to get rid of. Like I mentioned, liquids are often very hard to get rid of. Any kind of petroleum liquids, paint, that kind of stuff's hard to get rid of. Could I, and then how could I come in and do cleaning processes? So in addition to hauling stuff away, I'll come in, I'll clean it up. Like I'll clean out an empty building. If you've got a building, you'll clean it out and I'll get rid of everything that's in it. Take it away. That sort of a thing. Clean out. Somebody buys these houses where they buy them on television. They say, we make a bid, we'll buy it within 24 hours. Somebody goes in there, cleans everything out of the inside of that house, and gets rid of all of it. Start thinking about the value, where people have value for getting rid of stuff, and what is the stuff they want to get rid of, and would people have a value for getting rid of stuff in a better way, where it's like I said, recycling is a big deal now. A lot of people think about it, and they want to recycle. So when we went through the pandemic, for example, and a lot of the stores wouldn't take back plastic bags anymore. And, we started seeing people get really discouraged about, well, what am I supposed to do with these plastic bags when I can't take them to the grocery store anymore? And that was a real issue. It really bothered people. And I saw that. I said, wow, that's an opportunity. What I would do if I was a retailer and I wanted to continue on my business is I would put a big sign up that says, we accept your plastic film products, right, as recycling. And then I would just go get a container or two, park it in the back of my building, and just fill it up with the plastic bags until I could find somebody that would take them away and recycle them, because that would draw people into my store, right? So could you do that? Could you say, hey, in addition, I'll pick up your plastic bags, or if you separate your plastic water bottles and your drink bottles, I'll take those and I will make sure that they get 99% recycling on those. That kind of a thing, right? Look for there's always value in what you do.
Yeah, and I think a lot of
Don't
people,
genericize it.
yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people, they tend to want to stay in their sandbox. They like that one trash example I just gave. She's not even thinking beyond what she can do. She's thinking about how can I make the most of these 12 trucks and 10 roll-offs and all that. But if you really want to take your business to the next level, you've got to get out of the box, then think.
Yeah.
One of the things that
you had a good idea there.
Beginning.
I would certainly, always pursue ideas. What do customers need? If the customers really have a need for getting water delivered, I would say, okay, let's explore that as an opportunity. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with trash that I can understand, but that's okay. You've got customers; they've got a big need. They need water. We've got, if it's in Arizona, we know there's a drought that's affected California and Arizona, and people, it's likely a part of a trend. Let's build on that. Let's get into the water distribution business. What would that look like? Right off the top of my head, I don't know. I don't know what the business model would be. I don't know what you pay for water. I don't know what the cost of transportation is. I don't know what people would pay. But I think if people are in a situation where the taps are running dry, they probably pay a lot, right? They pay a lot to get water. And so the whole idea is find a need and fill it. And then to do that, look at your customers. And start with your existing customers. Most of them have some kind of a need they haven't gotten filled yet. And then they'll often kind of open your eyes to something that's happening in the bigger world, and you head off in that direction. And look for big trends. We've talked about demographics. We also talked now about ecology. Environmental awareness is a really, really big trend. And we're seeing ever more demand for environmental awareness and more regulation in that area. If you beat the regulations to market, you tend to make a lot of money. So again, work from the trends down, work from the scenarios, and do that because you spend less time figuring out how to optimize the business you already have. Because that's spending time there has the lowest yield. It's
Yep. All right, I have one more for you, and then we'll wind down. You ready?
Ready.
All right. So now this scenario is I have just acquired a bundle of businesses through I'm a private equity company, and we have this orphan company out there that brings comfort to elderly folks at their home. So not only a companion, but also does light chores and helps them to live an active lifestyle and remain in their home instead of going into hospice or into a health a nursing home. And so we currently have 300 homes and 300 residents and families that we support. And I'm looking, how do I divest this? How do I grow this? How do I, or do I dump this? Is it even worthwhile?
Well, okay. The first thing I would say is that demand is at the beginning of exploding. The need for that kind of care is going to go straight skyward, right? Because you got people living longer, and we don't do euthanasia in the United States. We don't say when people get really sick, we do everything possible to keep them alive as long as we possibly can, and that includes if they can't take care of themselves, we put them into facilities where somebody else takes care of them. So I would say, why in the world would you want to get rid of a business like that? Because that is a great place to go make money. And the people, end-of-life care, aged care, geriatric care, illness care, all of those are growing markets. And I would say, let's figure out how to go explore and develop that business. Let's take a look at how we could do things like, so I don't know if you ever heard of it, but it's called medical tourism. And that's where somebody who has insufficient insurance will say, hey, instead of getting a hip replacement in the United States where I don't have very good insurance, it's going to cost me $8,000, I'm going to fly to maybe France or Italy or Brazil or even India. And there's going to be, I'll check into a facility where they'll have Western grade medical care, and I'll get my hip replaced for $650. Right? That's called medical tourism. That's an industry today that's growing. I'd do the same thing here. I'd be like, say, okay, when people get older, is the best thing to do to house them in the United States, or should we look for, where should people be? Do we need to have them in one geography, like where they grew up? I mean, if they're in New York City, do they need to be in New York City, or should we look for a lower cost place that these people could live out their lives? So there's a tourism part to it, right? Yeah. There's also a part of it here, which would be immigration. And to what extent could I appeal to say, look, I want to create a classification of immigrants who would work in these facilities. And not that it's highly trained work, but because there's a lot of low train work here, and it's hard to recruit for that. And so we're not able to take care of as many people as we need. Could you go in, demonstrate some of that demand, and try to work for better or changed immigration rules to allow you to actually beat the competition by being able to grow much faster. Right. So I'd look at ways to use breakthrough techniques around the scenarios that would allow you to take advantage of the trend.
Right. And obviously this last one was a bit of a softball because I did start off talking about the value. I didn't talk about value delivery till second. It was a private equity person, so that they already have their eye on the ball. And in a growing demographic, the whole idea of do I pitch this was obviously a red herring there. But I think one of the things that's really important for our listeners and viewers to understand is, this conversation that Adam and I are having with these sort of scenarios should be happening in your company all the time. It shouldn't just be happening, December, in the middle of December, it should be happening all of the time. Because these are the kinds of conversations that are going to keep you on the edge of innovation and constantly pursuing new customers. And then ultimately, this is how you grow. And one more thing before I get your final few thoughts here, Adam, is the concept of bias. I'm a Gen X, Hispanic kid, whatever, and you're an early boomer, blah blah blah, from Oklahoma. We come from different worlds, right? We should have some other another 5-6 people in the conversation. We should have somebody in their 20s. We should have somebody in their 30s. Lots of women. Maybe somebody who's has a different gender identity and a gay person, whatever. We should have a whole different bias flattening conversation so we can get to the bottom of where things are happening.
And we tend to do the opposite. We tend to try to get people that are as much like us as possible when we do have the conversation. People are some own age, people are own gender, people are same religious backgrounds, same educational backgrounds. We tend to do just the opposite because it's more comfortable to have the conversation that way. Instead, you can, if you've got somebody who's from a different background, it's easy to feel embarrassed. It's easy that they'll say, you'll say something and you'll say it like it's a fact, and they'll look at you like, where in the world did that come from? And you're like, well, come on, that's the way the world is. And they're like, not my world. And then you feel embarrassed, right? And so we try to avoid actually having those people in these conversations about what's going on in your world, what's the opportunity, how do you do things? And you're absolutely right, Manny. We should be doing the opposite of what we tend to do.
Very good. Well, Adam, this has been a good conversation. These are conversations you should be having in your business. One last plug here for our course, Think Innovation. It really helps you to understand all these things we're talking about. You can also reach out to Adam and I at manny@sparkpartners.com and adam@sparkpartners.com if you want to have us come in and do one of these scenario planning situations with you. We do them remotely. We can do them in person. And we enjoy doing this, but it really has to come with you got to come to the table with a pretty open mind, and your team has to be ready to deploy on what might be decided on. So, Adam, thanks again. What final thought do you have for us before we log out today?
Most people don't do any scenario planning at all. And I would encourage you to at least start having a little bit of scenario planning. What does the future look like? And what are your customers saying are their needs?
Very well said, Adam. Thanks again. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Manny.
Cheers.